Hey everybody, Cerebral Tackle here. Today's video wasn't planned to be at this point in our little cinematic timeline, but life happens and here we are. This video is kind of a labor of love. It's that rod repair and restoration video that I started months and months and months ago. Well, here it is for you guys, and I hope you guys find some useful information with it. At my old place, it would have been easy to knock out. I had a workbench, perfect height, the whole setup. But we had a flood and we lost a bunch of stuff. Here at the new place, we haven't been able to recreate that same setup yet. So the first few times I tried to knock this out, I hurt my back really bad and it put me on the shelf for a while. But we've finally been able to jerry-rig something and here we are. As far as my extended absence otherwise, man, I want to apologize to you guys. I appreciate y'all so much for sticking with me. I had an accident which left me with injuries to my arms, my legs, and a pretty significant concussion. Add that with losing a dear friend of over 30 years, and well, yeah, I've been kind of out of touch with y'all. I apologize, and I'm glad you guys are still here. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and get some use out of it. I'm going to try to knock some timelines or chapters in the description of the video, so if y'all want to skip ahead, you can do that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy. As far as my first real coming back to the channel video, stay tuned. That'll be next. It's going to be full send, and y'all probably want to get your popcorn and your beer ready now, because it'll hopefully be here really soon. Thank you guys. Let's get back to the kind of unscheduled programming. Hey everybody, today's going to be a little bit different of a video. I want to share with you one of my favorite passions within the sport of fishing, rod repair. I end up getting a little bit of a name for myself around my area because of my attention to detail. And some would say that my process is very OCD. And let me tell you, there's zero money in it, but my reward is whenever I hand the rod back to the angler and they get this look of wow on their face because it looks like it just came to them off the shelf. That's what I go for. So anyway, you guys have been so great to me throughout the course of the year that I want to share a little bit of the juice back with you. So whether you're trying to refurbish a rod to get a little extra money for it to sell whenever you get rid of it, or if it's one of your favorite rods and you don't want to do the trade-in program because it needs a repair. Either way, I'm going to show you how to repair and restore a rod and show you my step-by-step process, full transparency, so you can use what parts you like. Anyway, I'll be working on a Kistler KLX 6.9 open water rod, but for purposes of like handle cork repair, I'm going to be using another rod so I can cover that. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's do it. So a couple of you more astute Kistler fans out there might be saying, a KLX has cork handles. What's he doing? Well, this gentleman liked his so much that he decided he wanted to do kind of a shrink wrap wind grip on over the cork. So I'm not going to wash the handle in the same way I would a full cork because I don't want to get water trapped within those spaces between the two, right? I don't want to risk rotting out the cork. So I'm going to use a different rod for that example so I can show you how that's done. With this specific rod, the reason it was brought to me was because not the stripper guide, but the next one up from it has been popped off right at the neck. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look right there, you can see the guide foot still underneath the wraps. You know what? That'll be helpful, and I'll show you why. Alrighty, so you have a rod that needs a repair. Maybe it's a tip that needs replacing, maybe a guide. Who knows? Maybe the guide's fine, but the guide foot's starting to kind of poke up through the threads a little bit, cracking the epoxy. Well, the very first thing you want to do is prep the surface and also check for other future repairs that might be coming quickly down the road that you don't know about yet. So what do you want to do? You want to clean the rod. For that example, I'm going to use this Cork handled Shimano Compre of mine. That's a really underrated rod. So as you can see, it's old, it's seen better days, it's been through a lot of tournaments. But the first thing we're going to do, prep the surface of the entire rod. We're going to start with the handle. Alrighty folks, I know the camera angle kind of sucks here, but I have a container of good warm water, almost hot, and I have just a regular little bit of Dawn dish soap, Dawn Ultra. Now, I'm not going to use a lot. I've wet a washcloth here, and I'm going to put just a little bit because, man, a little bit goes a long way. Like not even a dime size amount of the Dawn Ultra dish soap. I'm going to scrub it into the washcloth here pretty good. And then I'm going to sit and I'm just going to scrub this handle. Now I'm going to do so not super aggressive, but I'm going to get a good grip on it there. The goal of this is to use a good grease cutting, grime cutting kind of soap so that you get into the pores of the cork and release some of that dirt. You can see that already. You want to get as much of that dirt and oil and grime out of there, stuff from the boat, from the lake, from your sweat and body oils. You want to get as much out of that thing as possible. And you'll see the more that you twist the rod in your hand, the cleaner it starts to look. And take the scrubbing all the way down to the butt. As you see, we're getting a lot of crap off this thing. As you can already see, it's coming cleaner. Boy, howdy, look at that, folks. Now we're going to do the foregrip. Alrighty, now I've wet a second rag to go back over the areas I've already done to try to remove some of the initial soap off of them here. Now I'm going to take my soapy rag and I'm going to repeat the process across the rest of the blank. The reason why is if you're going to be working on a guide or a tip, you want any oils or impurities from the lake to be released off of that rod. That way your epoxy gets a good bond to the blank. So you're going to take, go down through, and also it'll help aid in the next step too, which is going to be a rod inspection. Here's a tip. You can clean EVA the same way. Use even less soap with EVA. The reason why is it's really hard to get soap suds out of EVA. It wants to soak it in like a sponge and hold it there in that foam. And when it does that, let's say you're out fishing one day and it starts to rain, your handle might become slippery and you might throw the damn thing in the water, and nobody got time for that. The next step is we're going to throw the bad dirty boy in the shower. Okay, now we've put the rod through the shower. It needs to be warm water to get all that soap off. Whether it's out in the yard on a hot summer day or inside the house in the shower in a cool one, make sure you get the rod thoroughly rinsed. Now the next step in the process is to go ahead and complete the cleaning by preparing the rest of the guides for inspection. You're going to need some 70% isopropyl alcohol and some basic Q-tips. Now you don't want to get alcohol on the blank as it can screw with the epoxy. So just wet the tip here of the Q-tip and take and just go in from both sides here on the guides. On micro guides and smaller guides like this, even the intermediate guides, the whole Q-tip won't go through. But just insert it from each direction, give it some good twirling, and then come by with the dry end and dry it off thoroughly. What this does is all the dirt and grime and algae from the lake water that really collects in these guides and keeps you from even getting them clean in the shower, this will remove that and take care of it. And the reason why you want to do that, and it's so important, is next. So you've identified the one guide that absolutely needs replacing, right? Well, while your rod's down, you probably want to inspect the other guides to make sure there's no problems that are just out there on the horizon. So what you're going to do next, you're going to think I'm crazy. You want to inspect the other guides for any hairline cracks or chips. You understand your line can be getting nicked and cut and you not even see it. It may be the reason why you're breaking off so many fish. Or if you've ever pulled in your line and seen those little curly cues where it looks like part of your line is getting pulled back and stripped, that's definitely a sign of a problem. So what I do is I take a cheap, inexpensive otoscope you can buy on Amazon or somewhere. You know, the little thing that the doctor used to look down your throat and in your ear when you were a kid? Or a cheap eye loop set, like this little 10 times magnifier here. And what you're going to do is you're going to take some light, go down every single one of your guides and look at the inserts. You're looking for any chips or hairline fractures. That means that guide is just a short amount of time away from going bad itself. So while your rod's down getting the other repaired, you might as well order the other parts, prep those services, and put them all on at the same time. Kill two birds with one stone. What you're going to do is just take the otoscope, line it up with the guide, and look completely around the interior of that guide, coming from both directions. Same thing with the eye loop. I tend to like the eye loop because it's a little bit easier. You don't have the light, but if you're wearing a headlamp, it'll also solve the problem too. But arrange it the right distance from your eye. You can move the rod around in all directions from either side, and you're looking for the tiniest of chip or a crack that goes from one side to the other. If you find either of those, take it off or replace it too. Now that you've identified which guides on the rod need to be replaced, you need to find their exact replacements. This is important for a couple of reasons. First, the height of the guide. From the top of the guide to the bottom of the guide here where the guide foot mounts on the rod, if it's too high or too short, it can cause line slap, which will really affect your casting distance. Second, and arguably most important, well, the insert type. If you put in a different insert type than what is in line with the rest of the rod, it's going to affect how your line transmits that vibration from the tip to the handle and screw up what's perfectly a nice sensitive rod. So it's very important you find the exact make and model. The easiest way to do this is contact the rod company themselves. Give them the make and the model and which guide it is. Most rod companies work on this numbering system. You go down to the tip. The tip is not your number one guide. Tip's just the tip. Just the tip. The first guide's number 1, number 2, number 3, all the way down to your last guide, which is that number that it falls in line with, or also known as your first stripper guide. Let them know which guide on the rod, make, model, year number, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. Sometimes they'll have a replacement guide they can send you for free or sometimes for a small charge. The one I'm working with today was from Kistler. It's a Kistler rod. Well, it's a Keegan. They had that perfect guide. Now, it cost about 20 bucks, 10 for the guide, 10 for shipping, but I was able to get that exact replacement guide in the mail from Kistler for 20 bucks. Other rod companies will have similar deals, or if you need to, you can go through Mudhole or another rod building company and find that replacement. How do you measure it? Let me show you. The proper way to measure the exact ring size of your guide is with the insert out of it. So let's say you've removed a guide that just has a hairline crack or a nick in it, but it's not totally out of it. Whatever you do, do not bend the frame, as that will change your measurement. But find a way to gently knock out the rest of the insert. Then you want to take the bare frame and a caliper, set to millimeters, and measure the widest diameter here from top to bottom of your guide. That will give you the proper ring size of your guide. Then you want to take a ruler and measure the height from the top of the guide down here to the ring foot. That will also give you the second measurement you need. That, combined with what insert type your guide is, will help you find the exact replacement you need for that guide. When it comes to rod repair and restoration, I'm a big stickler for efficiency. Well, you've just ordered your parts. It's going to be a little while before they get in. There's other things you can be doing in this process while you're waiting on them. Let me show you. See, technically, I'm working with 2 rods for the purposes of this video. One to show you the actual repair, and the other to show you how to restore cork. Well, let's say you have a cork handle rod and you want to get it all nice and prettied up too. Well, let me show you how you can be doing that while you're waiting on your parts to come in. Now, this is the other rod we were working with earlier, the one we lathered up and put in the shower to get all nice and pretty. As you can tell, it's already looking brighter than it was before it went in, but we're going to make it even brighter, and we're going to fill in some of these gouges. Let me show you how. Now, for this next step, you want to take masking tape or painter's tape, and you want to tape up around the blink of the rod here and anywhere around the reel seat where there's plastic that's up against cork. Why? Because you're going to be doing some sanding, and you don't want the sandpaper to scuff up the blink or the plastic on your reel seat. So to start, we're going to use just a little bit of 220C here. I know it's kind of gritty for what we're going to be doing, but we're not going to be using it for very long. Here, let me show you. You're going to start like up here at your foregrip, and you're going to sand. Now, beneath it, you might see I have this piece of cooking foil. There's a reason why. You want to catch any of the sawdust or, scuffings here from the sandpaper that you can, because you're going to be using it here in a bit. So you're going to come through, and you're going to sand this area clear around. You don't want to take off a big layer. You're not looking to do that. You're looking to take off just the outermost layer, just very, very, very thin layer of this cork all the way around. Okay, now that you have it sanded, you want to check, make sure you have some good shavings inside of your roll there. Knock what you can off of your sandpaper, and then you want to proceed to do the same thing to the back side. Good news and bad news. It looks like I've got the rod sanded perfectly like I would like. Bad news is I think I have more shavings on my shirt than I did in our piece of foil, but we have enough to work with. So now you're going to take paper towel. You're just going to kind of wipe the excess shavings off. And as you can see, it's already looking even brighter. And now we're going to go on to our next step. Next, we're going to proceed to fill in a few of our deep gouges that are in our cork handle. They did away with my favorite product, which was called pit paste, but I get why. The shelf life was garbage. But instead, we're going to be using Elmer's Pro Bond wood filler. They say it's 3 times stronger. We're going to be using this natural color here, but we're going to use a cheat code to match our color that's on our cork handles. Let me show you. Next, we're going to take those shavings that you got while you were sanding your rod, and you're going to put them like in a little epoxy mixing cup here, a good clean cup. You're just going to kind of pour those off into this cup. So you're going to take your epoxy cup with your shavings. Then you're going to take your Elmer's and you're going to squirt just a little bit of Elmer's in there. The goal here is to let your shavings help mix your color. Now that you have your shavings in your cup with your little bit of your Elmer's, you're going to sit there and kind of stir the paste around, trying to get all those shavings kind of mixed with it. You want to do a good amount of shavings and just a little bit of the Elmer's. This way, when you get all mixed good and together there, you can try to match as closely as possible the color of your gouge. Then you're going to take the mixture, and I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to use this mixing stick to kind of hold it. Then I'm going to take a wood carving tool, and I'm going to sit there and I'm just going to kind of press it in to the gouge. Try to get around where the camera can see it there. Just kind of spackle it in there. Go ahead and do that one while I'm at it too, might as well. My goodness, that come out perfect looking. Oh my gosh. Look at that little cheat. Let's do this one over here while we're at it. I'm having fun. Now see, a lot of times I wouldn't sand a rod. If I did, I would use much finer, like a automotive 1200 kind of, or 1500 kind of sanding paper. But because I wanted to show you guys the color matching hack here, I thought I would go ahead and use a bit wider. You can get away with 500 even. You don't have to go as big as 220 grain on sanding paper to get what you need. But just get some good fine shavings. And kind of fill it in. But I want you guys to see how well the color matches. And the reason I use these wood engraving tools or carving tools is so that I have a sharp edge I can go and I can wipe off with. A lot of the ones I'm not going to do on the back because this rod is older, has some sentimental value to it. I'm not looking to change a lot of its character. The color matches so perfect doing it this way that the hole went absolutely invisible. Boom. Done. Now, before our last step, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back over those areas I just spackled in after waiting 15 minutes for it to dry. And then I'm going to bust out this fine 1500 automotive sandpaper. And I'm just going to go over the surface of it, knocking down any hills or little mountains there that were created in the spackling process, and just getting them level with the surface of the cork around it. What's crazy is how hard it is to find the repairs that I did. I matched the color a little too well. Holy crap, that worked too good, guys. That worked too damn good. Now, one reason why the Elmer's Wood Filler was my second favorite cork filler product is because it is water soluble. So it will take a cork sealer around it to help it make it more durable in wet weather. For that, we're going to use the U40 cork seal. Now, what we're going to do with this is we're going to go, after the Elmer's has had a good enough time to dry, we're going to take a brush, and you're going to put on one very thin coat. One thin coat of this stuff, and then you're going to leave it overnight to dry. You never want to do 2 coats because it's a cork sealer. If you do 2 coats, the second coat will not correctly penetrate the cork because of the first coat, and you're just making it a tacky mess. Get around fully on that one. Now we're going to move to the back side. And now it's ready to sit up and dry for the night. Now before you rush right in and remove a guide, you want to take a couple of measurements first. Remember, we're trying to get this thing to look like it just come off the shelf. So the first thing you want to do is you want to measure the length of your thread wraps that attach your guide feet to your blank. Second, you want to measure these little guys here and here. Those are your epoxy ramps. That's where the epoxy kind of bleeds down from your wraps onto your blank for a little extra security. If you match those perfectly, you won't be able to tell the thing was ever repaired. Now we're going to remove what's left of the old guide. Remember at the beginning of the video when I told you that the guide foot still being under the threads was going to play into our favor? Here's why. We're going to use that as kind of our cutting backstop. You want a utility knife like an X-Acto blade here, and you want a lighter. Now, you never put heat directly on the blank. Heat is your rod's worst enemy, okay? You don't want to do that. These graphite walls are very, very thin. So what you want to do is take and you want to heat up your utility knife real good. And then you're going to use what's left of that guide foot that's on there as a backstop for your cutting. Slow and steady wins the race. You never want to take a chance on cutting your blank. This may mean coming back and reheating your X-Acto a few times. Take it slow. Don't get in a hurry. Now, when it comes to rod repair, I do not get in a hurry. If you get in a hurry, you make mistakes and you might end up replacing the whole damn rod. I've reheated my blade several times and I've worked at it slowly. With some effort, little practice, you'll get to this situation here where I've now been able to kind of cut laterally and kind of peel open this area of the thread. Now I'm going to take my pick and I'm going to slowly work at it, being careful to work from the blade up, not down to the blade. And the goal is to kind of pry this area up. When you do that, you'll be able to eventually grab it, and the rest will peel off in almost one complete piece. See that? See how it just gave? And you take, grab it, rotate the rod. Look at that. Those are your threads. So now we have the bulk of the threads removed from the center. Now we're left with this little epoxy neck at the top and the bottom and a little bit of thread. Sometimes what will happen is you can pull on the tag end and it'll just unfurl and just peel like an orange. This is being a bit more stubborn. So I'm going to go back to the blade, heat it up, and I'm going to come parallel to the blank and help cut and get under these epoxy necks. Once I have those free, I should be able to peel those off just like I did the thread. Now, sometimes you get lucky enough that you have like a little residual area of epoxy that shows you the exact outline of where your old guide foot was that you can kind of use as a reference. I got it too clean. Well, you know, what do you do? So I'm going to make it even cleaner, just being a perfectionist again. I have 1500 grit wet sand automotive sandpaper. And I'm just going to kind of touch up the area only where the guide was, the epoxy necks, the thread. You don't want to get it on the rest of the blank. You want to be very careful. Perfect. Now, as I've said over and over and over, we're trying to get this thing perfect. So when I called Kistler to order the guide from them, I also inquired as to what size and brand and color of threads they used on this rod. They told me it was a size D in Pro Wrap, color 419 gray. The problem is, Pro Wrap has never made a 400 series that was gray. Their 400 series is blue. So I did some research, and sure as heck, it's actually 819 gray. I don't know if you can see that there, folks, but that's a perfect freaking match. Now, before positioning your guide on your rod, you want to prep the guide foot. For that, I use my little Rapala line stripper and hook sharpener. And what I'll do is I'll take and I'll just follow the very end of the guide foot here to make it just a little more narrow, a little thinner and flatter. That way, whenever you go to wrap your thread, it'll hop up on the guide foot a little easier. And I'm also going to show you a little hack. On guide frames such as this that are black, whenever you prep the guide foot and just file it down a bit, it'll take off that black finish. Well, in order to keep from seeing the silver underneath the threads, you just take a Sharpie, mark the end, and when that's under the threads, you won't be able to tell the difference. Now it's time to position our guide onto the rod. You want to make sure it's perfectly in line with the guide in front of it and behind it. So, like I said before, sometimes there's a bit of an epoxy outline where the old guide foot was. That'll help you get close. You'll still have to tweak it a little bit, but I cleaned the surface too well. So I'm going to have to eyeball it. To do this, I'm going to line it up about where I think it needs to be. And I'm going to use this tape to secure it temporarily. This is a special 1/8 inch diameter masking tape that you can purchase at Mudhole. Links for all of this stuff will be in the description below, by the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up the rod. I'm going to look down the barrel of it to see if these guides align. Now I've looked down the barrel of it. I have it aligned perfectly, and we're ready to wrap. Now remember those measurements I took earlier? You might have a hard time seeing it, but there's a little white dot right there. That's where I've used my China marker to mark the measurements as to where my thread needs to start. Now I'm going to proceed to wrap the guide on. There are a lot better tutorials than this when it comes to close-up footage on how to exactly wrap the guide. I'm going to do the best I can, but I just don't have the equipment that other people do. I'm going to make my X and my thread, bring my tag in, back around to the business end in which I'm wrapping, put tension on it, and I'm going to start to wrap. Now, as you can see, we've made a few wraps. We've now jumped up on that guide foot. Sorry, guys, I was doing this video leaning over. My back went out. So I'm going to be doing the rest of this in extreme pain. Now we're going to take our masking tape off the guide and finish wrapping. Okay, guys, so we're almost to the end of our wrap here. And now I'm going to insert my little thread pull. This is what will help us tie it off here at the end. I'm going to come here to the back of the blank, directly behind the guide. About 4 turns or 3 or 4 turns from the end of where the neck starts to come up here on the guide, maybe 5. I'm going to insert that there. That'll help us tie it off here at the end. So this isn't a micro guide. This is kind of an intermediate guide. Kind of a half step below a micro guide. And what I like to do with micro guides, and I'm going to do with this guide, is I'm going to show you a 4-hand locking wrap. It helps keep those small guides on big, powerful rods from coming out. Right now I'm just doing some continuing wrapping and kind of making sure everything's nice and compact. Now that we're at the guide neck, here's how we're going to do our 4-hand locking wrap. We're going to release a little bit of the tension here, and we're going to do a loop around, and then we're going to come behind the guide. Then we're going to continue wrapping tight. I'm going to tighten my spool here a little bit from where I release the tension. We're going to wrap again. This time we're going to come to behind the guide.
The reason for doing this is it helps apply pressure from the top side of the guide, helping lock that guide into place, hence the name forehand locking wrap. We're going to come around again. And we're going to continue to wrap here to the front. At the end, we're going to push those threads right up there good and tight. And use my thread pick to kind of push them together, kind of locking that in there a bit better. I like to lock it in real good with several wraps. I do more wraps than a lot of people do, but it's for the protection of the guide, and it helps out quite a bit. Now we're kind of where we need to be with the locking wrap, I should say. And now here's, I'm going to do one more. Now I'm going to hold tension. I'm going to cut my thread. I'm going to feed the line here through my pull through. Might be kind of hard for you guys to see there. I want it to come from the other way. Then I'm going to take my pull through. I'm going to slide this through. That ties us off. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to burnish my threads. Make sure everything's nice and straight and pushed up even before clipping off the last bit of thread there. Now we're going to take and cut our tag in here off the end. We're done. Alrighty folks, as you can see here, I've got the guide now secured and wrapped on the rod. I even have the painter's tape laid down to give us what the measurements showed us for the epoxy necks, that 1/16 of an inch buffer both above and below the guides. But remember back during the rod inspection process when I told you to look for signs of stress fractures in the epoxy on the other guides, or maybe even where a guide foot was trying to poke up through the threads? Well, you know what? When you put on the first round of epoxy for this new guide, that first coat of Flex Coat Light Build, it's the perfect opportunity to take care of any other issues you found. And by the way, a little cheat code hack, what I love to do is lay down some painter's tape on the existing epoxy necks of the other guides and put a very thin coat of that Flex Coat Light Build over those as well. What it does is it makes all the guides match and look like they were all freshly put on. Gives a whole new look to the rod. And also, I found an issue, small issue, with one of the other guides. Let me show you. What you're looking at here is the number 5 guide on the rod we're working on. Do you see that cracking there underneath the guide neck where the epoxy is pulled away from the blank? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nice little handy X-Acto knife and I'm going to very carefully cut it away from the guide and away from the blank there. Then I'm going to lay down more painter's tape there above that guide. And then when I go over the light build on the new guide, I'm going to lay down a little coat right there too. It'll help reinforce that guide underneath that guide neck and will make this guide look back in true form. All right, folks, we're finally at the point where we have our replacement guide wrapped onto the rod blank. We've got our painter's tape down so we get those nice, clean epoxy ramps. And now I'm going to introduce you to the products that I use and a few things you're going to need to get on and get this bad boy finished up. First up is the epoxy we're going to use. My favorite epoxy in the whole wide world to do rod repairs is Flex Coat Light Build. Flex Coat makes several products. Make sure you're getting the blue label Light Build. Now you can get these smaller little kits with the small bottles here. However, that's all fun and dandy, especially if you're not going to do a lot of repairs. But what I prefer to use, though, is the bigger bottles. And there's a reason why. It's because of these bad boys right here. These are syringe caps. Kind of hard to see them there, but they're nice little caps that when you pound them down into the tops of these bigger light coat bottles, it allows you to insert a syringe into the end and draw out a very precise amount of epoxy per type.
your hardener and your epoxy. The reason why is you want to mix these two units exactly, 1-for-1 ratio. If not, you're going to have an ooey gooey mess and it's just not going to work out for you. Now these are the syringes I was just talking about, your Flex Coat color-coded syringes. You have one for your black top, one for your yellow top. That way it's easy peasy, you don't get them confused, because the last thing you want to do is put the wrong kind back in the other syringe. Any residual, well, there goes your syringes. Used properly, keep them separate. A set of these will be able to last you a whole hell of a long time. Next, you're going to want to get you a set of nice single-use graduated mixing cups. I don't know if you can see there, it's kind of hard, but nice little graduated increments on the side. That way, if you're not using a syringe, you still need to get it just 1-to-1 ratio of both your hardener and your epoxy, or your resin, whatever you call it, your black and your yellow tops, 1-to-1 ratio each. Really, I don't like using the sides of the cups for that. That's why I love the syringes. Get you some stir sticks as well. Because just as important as getting the right mixture, you're going to have to get it mixed properly. And I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. Next up, you're going to want to get some cheap craft brushes. You can get these at the craft store, go through somewhere like Mud Hole or Lure Parts online. You can get a bunch of them for pretty cheap. Anyway, going to need a lot of these because you're going to go through them, again, single use. Another thing I love to do is I love to take a small paper plate and cover it in aluminum foil. Because after you're done mixing your epoxy, and I'm going to show you, you got to mix it really well. After you're done mixing it, you're going to pour it onto here. It allows for some of the heat to dissipate, some of the bubbles to go ahead and come on out of your epoxy mix, and gives you a longer pot life to work with once it's on this aluminum foil. Finally, get some paper towels. They can be cheap, but just something you can do the select a size thing. Rip off a couple of sheets, and then you're just going to take and maybe even square them down about like so. Make you a few pieces about this size. I'll show you why. Next, we're going to take our syringes and we're going to insert the yellow syringe here into the yellow top epoxy part. Now, I mix a hell of a lot less epoxy than what's told by the company to do it, what they instruct, but that's because I've been doing it a while. So I'm kind of a bad example there. We'll take it, I'm going to insert it into the plunger top there, and I'm going to draw out exactly 1 cc of each and put it in to our little mixing cup. Now we're going to take out our 1 cc of our black cap, and we're going to put that into our nice little cup with our yellow. Now we've got our 2 parts inside of our cup, and we're going to mix for a good 2 to 3 minutes. Now, a big part of this is as you're mixing, make sure you go through with the stick and scrape everything that gets on the sides. You want it mixed thoroughly. Everything on the sides, everything in the bottom. Anyway, I would say 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, now that your epoxy is thoroughly mixed, you're going to dab your brush in and kind of scrape a lot of the extra off on the sides of the cup. It's going to be real thin. You don't need to gob it on. Then you're going to take and you're just going to rotate the rod as you soak those threads good and evenly. And just rotate the rod around. Make sure not to get it obviously inside of your guide, but I'm sure that's, goes without being said. You don't want it inside the insert. But go through and just saturate those threads. And make sure to get it in those nice little areas that you already have measured out what's going to be your epoxy necks right there, or ramps. I keep calling them necks. Epoxy ramps.
And you'll see the threads just will kind of soak up this light build. And you'll want to very carefully go in behind the guide without, make slow strokes behind there without getting into the insert. That way you can kind of make sure that you get everywhere and that the epoxy gets back in behind that guide. In this case, I have a 4-hand locking wrap, and that's all fine and dandy too. I'm a little bit rusty. It's been a minute since I've done one. So I'm sure there'll be some haters in the comments telling me how I'm doing it wrong, but to each their own. I've done a lot of repairs for friends and folks and some very expensive rods, and I've never got any complaints. In fact, only very kind words. Not saying there's not a first for everything. I'm going to go through and just kind of wipe off some of the excess here. And I'm doing that by wiping onto the painter's tape, but without wiping past the painter's tape on to the part of the blank that we're not messing with. You don't want to do that. Now, remember how I said I'm going to go through and there was, one guide that kind of needed a little bit of a touch-up, but I'm also going to go through and layer a nice little coat of light build across the other ones to make them all look new? That's what we're going to do next. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to be careful not to run my other one into the end of my wrapping station here. I'm going to take this one, and I'm just going to go around on it. Next, I'm going to show you what that thread pick is good for, besides obviously picking threads. I'm going to start actually with the one that we originally went for here. I'm going to use it to kind of peel back the painter's tape so you don't get your fingers all gooey, and so it takes it off nice and even. Lay that over here onto my foil. Grab the other end. Do it as well. Now what I'm going to do next is take that little piece of paper towel I told you about earlier. We're going to get a nice straight edge, and we're going to use it to bump our epoxy ramps just a little bit, make sure they're extra clean. Hold it tight to the rod, rotate it nice and perfectly flat. That way you can turn it if need be. Go back the other way. And I'm going to come to the upside of the guide and repeat the process. Then I'm going to come down here, repeat the process. Now, I have both the epoxy ramps on both of these guides bumped, and it's time to put it over in the drying station. I'm going to leave it there for about 12 hours, come back, and repeat the process. As you can see, we have the rod on the drying station now. This is a 3-motor drying station made by CRB, which is a mud hole brand. If my memory serves me correct, it's about a 12 RPM motor there on each of them. They all have toggle switches. You can turn them off and on independently. Really nifty. And in case you don't know the reason behind one of these, it's to keep the rod slowly turning until the epoxy dries so that it doesn't gob up in one place and it looks nice and pretty for you. I'm going to leave this rod on the turner here for about 12 hours before I pull it off and I put another fresh coat on top of the one we just did for that guide that's going to be repaired. I'm also going to go down to the next guide or two down the rod and slap a fresh thin coat on those as well, just to make them all look uniform. And I'm going to repeat that process on the main guide until it reaches the same thickness and height as all of the other guides. And then there's still one final thing we're going to do to just give this thing the chef's kiss. Okay, folks, so we have the repaired guide wrapped up, epoxied up. It only took 5 coats of light build, but I confess, I let one of them thicken up a little bit so we could get to that same thickness and height of the epoxy that the other guides have so that it matches. The finished product looks like this. As you can see, there are some threads kind of out in front of the guide. That's that 4-hand locking wrap I was telling you about. Trust me, to get this guide off of this rod, you're going to have to saw the dadgum thing off or shutter the rod. It's on there for the lifetime of the rod. And you might remember, I told you about another guide I was going to repair where the epoxy had kind of cracked away from the blank right there at the neck of the guide. Well, I got that one touched up too. I'm going to show you what it looks like now. You might see there's a little bit of epoxy kind of in front of the guide. That helps secure that to the rod and gives a little bit of support to that guide neck. Therefore, when the rod flexes and bends, it doesn't put as much stress on the guide foot, keeping that thing from popping out. And now, the last step is to get onto the chef's kiss. Let me show you. Now, our finishing touch comes from a company called Reilley's Rod Crafters. It's their Reilley's Rod Wax. Adding a little bit of this to the rod will give your rod some great UV and weather protection, therefore kind of extending the life of your rod. Trust me, if you have a rod that you really love and you want to take good care of it, man, visit the folks over at Reilley's. Their contact information will be in the description section below. Give these folks your business. They're awesome, great customer service. And this rod wax, it's fantastic. Let me show you how it works. Now what you're going to want to do is get your Reilley's Rod Wax. Take one of the 2 microfiber cloths, get some on there like so, and then go down the length of the blank, putting a thin coat of the rod wax onto the blank. Make sure to go over all your guides anywhere you have that epoxy. It gives a little extra UV protection to that epoxy and helps keep it from breaking down, causing those connections to weaken. After you've completed this for the entire length of the rod, you're going to want to leave it to set for 5 to 10 minutes. Come back with the other clean microfiber cloth and buff it all off. A thin coat is all it takes. Trust me, it will make that rod look beautiful. It's the freaking chef's kiss. All right, we've taken our clean microfiber, we've buffed it out. As you can see, it's a nice, beautiful shine, and we're ready to go. And just like that, this Kistler KLX medium open water is ready to go home to its daddy. And sir, thank you for letting me work on your rod on camera. I want to thank each and every single one of you guys for being here and watching this video. And if you found something educational, do me a favor. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave them below. A special shout out goes to all my channel members. I couldn't do it without you guys. Until next time we meet, get your gear repaired and ready. Get out there on the water and keep it wet.
Yo, it's a real tackle, let's get to the facts. I don't sugarcoat nothing, I'm spitting the max. You think I'm holding back? Nah, I better step back. I'm dropping lines like